Hello, welcome to the AI playlist. My name is Mohit Chavda, ex-Salesforce, ex-Walmart, and in today's video we will talk about model, training and inference. Let's start with model. What is a model? You can think of model as a mathematical function that learns the patterns from the data to make the predictions or decisions on new data. So for example, say you have this input data, you give this to model. So model is kind of a function. This is model and this is input. Okay, so model is kind of, you can say, function or method which tries to learn from the data. It tries to learn the patterns so that it can make predictions or take decisions using this data on the new data. Let's take an example. Say you are doing lead code. Okay, in lead code you are basically solving problems of related to DSA, data structures and algorithm. Every time you solve a question, you try to learn a pattern. Say for example, it can be a sliding window, or you can say two pointers. All such things you try to learn so that you can apply that logic on any other new question as well. So similarly, the model is also trying to learn from the input data. It tries to identify the patterns so that it can be applied later to make predictions and take decisions. Now let's see some of the examples so that you get more understanding of model. Say for example, your task is spam detection. So in the input you are given email, and as an output you need to tell whether the email was spam or not spam. So basically you will train your model with the input data. It will get to know what kind of emails are spam and not spam, and based on that it will learn the patterns so that it can predict in future as well for any new email. Similarly, another example can be house price is a task. So the input would be, you will be given the area, the bedrooms, the location, and you need to predict the price of the house as an output. So in this case the model is trying to figure it out, like if the area is large and the location is good, then the price will be higher. So it will identify such kind of patterns. Now how this happens? It happens using the model parameters. So basically you can say there are a lot of neural networks. Okay, and for every neural network some weight is assigned. So for example, it gets to know, like if area is larger, then the price goes higher. Similarly, if the location is good, the price goes higher. So it assigns some weight or numbers to that logic, because at the end it will use all the logics to make the predictions. So it will assign some score which is called as weight to each of the logic, and these numbers will decide how strongly each features affect the output. So for example, the area is one of the feature, location is one of the features. Like this you can have many other features, and it will assign weight to each of these, and based on the weightage your output or prediction will come. And these parameters are learned from the data, because we are in the training stage. So you get the input, and based on the input you are learning and assigning weight to the parameter. So this was about model, and we talked a lot about training. So let's see what actually training is. So training means teaching the model and adjusting its internal parameters that we just talked about to reduce the prediction errors on the known data. So basically what happens is, like, you are trying to adjust the parameters so that you can give accurate and efficient prediction. So basically you can say you have the input, then you learn the patterns, and based on that you refine the parameters so that you can improve the accuracy of your model for future predictions. Let's take an example. So in the training phase, say you had two emails. First one was spam and other one was not spam, but say the model predicts it wrong. So what it does, it adjusts its weight to do better next time. That's the whole fundamental of training, right? So that you can improve in your logic, and with training it improves its system so that the accuracy of the model becomes better, and that happens using training. So basically the goal of training is that your model's prediction become highly accurate and efficient, so that if you're given any new data, you are able to identify the output with very high accuracy. Say for example, in case of emails, any new email come, so your model is that good trained that it can tell with accuracy that yes, it is a spam email, when actually it was an spam email. But another point is that we do not want to overfit. What does that mean? that we don't want to memorize too much. So basically it should not happen that the model is just memorizing the things, right? It should learn the patterns, it should improve the fundamentals or the logics using which it can predict or take decision for new data. It is similar to, for example, on lead code you are solving few of the problems. Instead of memorizing, what you want to do is learn the patterns, understand the fundamentals and logic, so that if in interview you are asked in question, you can use those patterns and learnings to solve this problem. Because generally in the interview you are not given the same question, there is some new element or trick added to the question, so your logics fundamentals should be good enough that it can also solve some new problem. Similarly for model, it should not memorize all the stuff, it should basically learn the pattern so that it can predict that for any new data as well. So you can see it here. Here is the initial model predictions. It will make some errors, it will identify the errors, and based on that it will adjust the weights and learn the patterns, so that finally you have improved predictions. Okay, we talked about model and training. Now let's go to inference. Basically, it means that you are using the trained model to make the predictions on new and unseen data. Extending the example that we just talked above, say you trained your model for spam detector and you got a new email, so it's a new data now. So you run it through the model says spam with 90% confidence. So the important point to understand here is that no more learning is happening at this stage. When we talk about inference, it is basically that there is no more learning, it is just using what is already learned, it is just making predictions. Okay, so basically you get new data and you predict based on the learnings that you already have using the training phase. But then what is the difference? So basically in the training phase you learn the patterns, you adjust the parameters. In the inference stage you just make the predictions because your model is already trained, you already have the learnings. In case of training you use the label data. What does that mean? That you already have the input and corresponding to that you already know the output. Say for example, for an email which is given to you as an input, you already know whether it's spam or not spam. Okay, so basically based on that you will make the predictions, check the output and learn. So basically in this case, based on the input and output, you learn like this email can be spam, this is not spam, so you try to learn the patterns. So that is called label data, because which means that output is already known, so you are just learning. But in case of inference you use the new unlabeled data, so basically you don't know the output, so you are not learning anything, you are just making the predictions in this stage. Talking about the model changes in the training phase, yes, we update the parameters. Why? Because it's a learning stage, you will learn the new patterns and based on that you will set the parameters. But in case of inference we don't make any model changes, we just make the predictions. So if we talk about the summary, model, training and inference, basically model you can say as a program or a function that maps input to output. Training is a stage where model learns from labeled data, that is the output is already known for the input, and based on that you learn the patterns and adjust your parameters. And talking about inference, basically your model just performs the predictions on new or unseen data. If I show you in this image, we have both things, training and inference. So in case of training you can see we have the input data, so the model will learn from it and it will update its model. Whereas in inference, basically for the input data the model will just make the prediction but it won't update its parameters. So in the last video we talked about the dataset split. In case you missed that, you can refer to this video. So it had one validation step. You might confuse the inference with the validation step. So let's try to see what is the difference between the validation and inference. Basically in the validation step of data split, we used to evaluate the model and also tune the model. So basically some of the hyperparameters or the settings we used to change that. But in inference we just use the model to make the predictions, we are not updating any of the settings. So the validation step in the split used to happen after the training. So this was training phase and then you had the validation, and then after that you have the testing phase. But inference can happen anytime. Basically you are just making predictions in it, so you can make predictions anytime while training, while validation, and while testing as well. Talking about the model change, this is the main point. Basically we do the model changes in the validation step. In the training we update the parameters. In the validation step we update the hyper parameters, that is the settings which are already assigned to the model, which you don't learn, but it's kind of the settings. Say for example you were doing lead code problems, okay, your settings were like you were taking around 1 hour to solve a medium question, but then you go to the contest which acts as a mock interview, that is the validation step. In that you realize that you had 2 questions to solve in 1 hour, but you took 1 hour to solve just one question. So it was your setting that you need to modify. You need to understand that you need to solve the problem in 25 minutes. So you update your hyperparameter based on that. Like from now you just need to solve a problem in 25 minutes. That's your new target. So that kind of things you update in the validation step in dataset split. But for inference you are not making any changes, you are just making the predictions. So you are just getting the output from the model. So in simple term, inference is basically making a prediction, that's it. Whereas validation uses the inference because it also makes predictions and then checks if the results aren't good. So basically it will check the hyperparameters and update the settings. So basically the inference is kind of just making prediction, and that can happen in any stage: training, validation, testing. Whereas validation is kind of a step that we use in the dataset split as a middle step. So basically in training stage or validation stage you basically refine the model as well. Some of the settings in the training phase you have the parameters, in the validation stage you have the hyper parameters, okay, but you update or modify these things. But when we talk about inference, it is just making predictions, no update of model. It is just a step to make the predictions, and it can be used in any stage. Okay, so in this video we talked about a few basic things, which were the model, what is a model, and then we talked about what is training, what is inference, and then we also checked the differences between training and inference, and also we tried to differentiate the inference with the validation step that we did in the last video of dataset split. I hope you got some idea of these basics. In case you have any doubts, put that in the comment section. I'll try to help you out. If you found this video helpful, press the like button and share it with your friends so that all of us can become AI pro. Alright then, this is Mohit Chabda signing off. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.